Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate the time. I appreciate you giving me a moment to set up my charts because I've got some pretty ones down here, and I'm sorry you can't see them, Mr. Speaker. I've got here the White House. You know, the White House isn't the President's house, it's our house. And I think that every time I drive by, Mr. Speaker, I go past and I think, you know what? I own that. I may live in a little old apartment of my own, but when I drive by the White House, I think I own a piece of that. That house belongs to me. And I hope every American believes that same thing. It is our house. And if you have not gone to your member of Congress to try to get a tour of the White House, I encourage you to do it. I encourage you to do it because it belongs to you, and presidents, Republican and Democrat alike, open up those doors so that we can see our White House as American. It's a symbol of freedom around the world. I printed this one up in full color. I spent a little extra. I'm pretty thrifty in my budget. If you know anything about me, you know not only did we cut our budget here in the U.S. House of Representatives, I cut mine another 10%. Beyond that, we're going to give back about $300,000 to the American taxpayer. But we spent the extra money to put down the blue sky of optimism, because this is the President's election night victory speech in 2008. Do you remember it? Do you remember it, Mr. Speaker? Because I remember it. I remember the promise of a better day, and here it is, as he's talking about bipartisanship, because it gets a lot of lip service in this body, Mr. Speaker, but it takes hard work. It takes hard work. Here we go. Talking about bipartisanship and partisanship in particular, he says, I will resist the temptation to fall back on the same partisanship and pettiness and immaturity that has poisoned our politics for far too long. Hadn't been sworn in yet. Inauguration hasn't happened yet. Victory speech, 2008. I will resist the temptation to fall back on the same partisanship and pettiness and immaturity that has poisoned our politics for far too long. That inspires me, Mr. Speaker. Would that it be true. Let's move past full color to the stark black and white that is the world we're living in today, Mr. Speaker. Here is the President from last month, giving up on that commitment of bipartisanship. When questioned about the partisan angle that he took throughout the Social Security debate, throughout the Doc Fix debate, throughout the unemployment debate, he said this, that he concluded it was going to take more than a year. It was going to take more than 2 years. It was going to take more than one term, probably takes more than one president. Mr. Speaker, you know as well as I know, we've only been in this institution just over 1 year now. It does not take time, it takes courage to make things happen in this body. It does not take hours, it takes I-do's. It takes somebody standing up and saying, I will be responsible for that. Which the President did, Mr. Speaker. He said, I will be responsible for ushering in a new era into Washington, D.C. As a freshman legislator, I took him at his word. 4 years later, here we are. Can't do it in a year, can't do it in 2 years, he couldn't do it in 3 years, and now he says it probably takes more than one president. Might take a different president. But he says it's going to take more than one. Let me take you back to sunshine and apple pie, Mr. Speaker, because that's what we're about here in America. We thrive on challenges. We thrive on opportunities to do better. We want one generation to do better than the previous generation. We want the next generation to do better than our generation. Here's what President Obama says. August 2008, talking about his vice presidential pick. After decades of steady work across the aisle, I know he'll, talking about Senator Biden, now Vice President Biden, be able to help me turn the page on the ugly partisanship in Washington. Democrats and Republicans together to pass an agenda that works for the American people. Who doesn't believe in that, Mr. Speaker? Who doesn't believe in that? Who doesn't believe it's not necessarily compromise? It can be consensus. Who doesn't believe on coming together to pass an agenda that works for the American people? You do, Mr. Speaker. I do. Take you back to the stark black and white, Mr. Speaker, of where we've come. President Obama, November 2010, just 2 months ago. when talking about why it is his administration has taken on such a partisan tone. He says this: I neglected some things that matter a lot to people, and rightly so that it matters to people. Maintaining a bipartisan tone in Washington. I'm going to redouble my efforts to go back to some of those first principles. Mr. Speaker, you and I came here for the same reason. We came here to get stuff done for our constituents back home. We came here to uphold the Constitution and the freedoms that it preserves for our constituents back home. We've been stuck in a environment in Washington, D.C. where the Senate refuses to act on any of the legislation that we put forward, refuses to act on any of their own legislation. We have a president who says this about his leadership in this town: I neglected some of the things that matter to a lot of people, and rightly so that they matter. Maintaining a bipartisan tone in Washington. And I'm going to redouble my efforts to go back to some of those first principles. Well, you know, Mr. Speaker, that's the funny thing about principles. You're not supposed to have to go back to them. You're supposed to stick with them. Day in, day out, good times, bad times. It's easy to have principles in the good times. Whew, it's easy. It's when times get tough that principles really matter. This was 2 months ago, Mr. Speaker. The President is going to redouble his efforts to go back to some of those first principles of his, which is ending the partisan tone in Washington, D.C. November 2010. Well, folks know what happened. Probably this a year ago. Folks know what happened in November 2011. We began the discussion of what to do to solve health care issues for our seniors, because Medicare reimbursement rates were on their way down and seniors might not have had access to care. We wanted to protect our seniors to make sure that access to care existed. We had unemployment benefits that were getting ready to expire. We had folks who were depending on those benefits, trying to sort out how it was that we'd continue those and reform that program so it doesn't just provide a check, but it provides a way back to employment. And we had Social Security, the payroll tax break that the President instituted December of 2010, right after he made this comment, that reduces the Social Security contributions of every working American by a third. Reduces the Social Security contributions of every working American by a third, but does nothing to change the benefits that those working Americans get back when they retire, and thus accelerates the bankruptcy of the Social Security Trust Fund, not to mention breaking that link that has been omnipresent in this country with Social Security. It is not an entitlement in the welfare sense of the word. It is an entitlement in that you paid into it, and so you have earned it. You deserve it. We're changing that linkage for the very first time. And following that debate, I wake up in the morning down in the 7th District of Georgia. They're the northern suburbs there of Atlanta. I was in Gwinnett County. Wake up to find out the President has made recess appointments. Oh, I got to tell you, I went through the roof, but you might not have gone through the roof, Mr. Speaker. I don't know where everybody was, all 300 million Americans, where they were when they woke up to that news that morning, or where they were with regard to their Constitution. I carry mine. I know you carry yours, Mr. Speaker, and I would encourage anybody who doesn't have one to contact another member of Congress. We can absolutely get you one. The United States Constitution, the rule book by which everything we do here should be judged. Should be judged. That's why recess appointments matter, Mr. Speaker. What I have here, Mr. Speaker, is Article 2, Section 2 of the United States Constitution. I'll just back up just a little bit, make it clear for folks who haven't studied the Constitution recently. Article 1 delegates the legislative powers to the United States Congress. Article 1, the very first order of business of our founding fathers in framing our republic, was to protect the people's powers here in the people's house and in the United States Senate. Article 1. Article 2 vests power in the executive. Article 2, Section 2 Clause 3, the President shall have the power to fill up all vacancies that may happen during the recess of the Senate by granting commissions which shall expire at the end of their next session. Well, seems pretty straightforward. Pretty straightforward, but it's not. You know, that's what's so wonderful about our Constitution, Mr. Speaker. Our founding fathers had the wisdom to say enough without saying too much. Shortly after the ratification of the Constitution, Alexander Hamilton was writing on this topic. And when he read this very same clause, he read this: the President shall have the power to fill up all vacancies that may happen during the recess of the Senate. What Alexander Hamilton saw, Mr. Speaker, is that the only vacancies that can be filled are those vacancies that occur during a recess of the Senate. Not vacancies that are getting filled then, but vacancies that actually occurred then. This is important language. It's important language because I live 640 miles away from the United States Capitol. Now, I happen to travel with my friends at Delta, and they get me here in an hour and a half. But if I had to get on my horse and ride, it'd take a little while. There's a good reason there was recess appointments going on in the founding of this republic, Mr. Speaker, and I hope we can get back to having more recess here. Why in the world we've let this Congress evolve into a full-time job that takes place year-round, I do not know. General Assembly in Georgia meets for 40 days. 40 days out of a year. I tell folks back home, I will have achieved success when it is we in Washington, D.C. who only meet for 40 days out of a year, because we have sent that power that has been gradually stolen from the people, stolen from the communities, stolen from the states, and returned that power to those communities. But it was a real issue in the early days of our republic that there was a recess, and we wanted to give the president the power to continue the republic even when you couldn't get a hold of the United States Senate for confirmation. Well, in the age of iPads and BlackBerries and fax machines, it's not that hard to get in touch with folks. Not that hard to get in touch, folks. Easy to reconvene the Senate, but still on the books today, President shall have the power to fill all vacancies that may happen during the recess of the Senate. Now, you may be asking, Rob, why do you even care about this? You're in the House. This doesn't concern you. Let me tell you, this concerns me, and it concerns every American, because it concerns the rule book by which our republic is governed. And if we decide that the rule book doesn't matter, something small today, it's going to be something medium-sized tomorrow. It's going to be something huge a year from now. And the freedoms that our Constitution has so ably protected for over 200 years will soon be gone. Now, this isn't a partisan fight. This is an American fight. I'll tell you that when we had a Republican president in the White House and Republican members controlling this U.S. House and Republican members controlling the U.S. Senate, power left this House and went down to the executive branch. Republicans allowed legislative power to leave this House and get transferred to the executive branch. We've got to be on duty all the time. It's not Republican, Democrat. It's executive U.S. House. Why? Because when our framers were framing the Constitution, they knew tyranny of the executive was what was to be feared. King of England. Tyranny of the executive was what was to be feared, and so they invested most of the power in the people's house, in the Congress, in the House, in the Senate. This is where our framers trusted that power to reside. But they gave to the president the power to make appointments in recess of the Senate. Why is this important at all? Article 2, Section 2, Clause 2, which is known as the Advice and Consent Clause. The President shall, by and with the advice and consent of the Senate, to make treaties, provided that 2/3 of senators present concur, and he shall nominate, and by and with the advice and consent of the Senate shall appoint ambassadors, other public ministers, and counsels, and judges of the Supreme Court, and all other officers of the United States whose appointments are not herein otherwise provided for. Hear this. The President absolutely, positively has the power to appoint whomever he wants by and with the advice and consent of the United States Senate. By and with the consent of the United States Senate. If the Senate is not in session, Clause 3 takes over. During those times, the President shall have the power to fill those vacancies, and it shall not extend past that one session. Well, Mr. Speaker, what happened over Christmas? What happened over Christmas? As the rights and privileges of the American people were stolen out from under us here in the United States House and Senate and transferred to the executive branch, is that the President said, and you'll remember the quote, he said, if I can't do it with Congress, I'll go around Congress. Do you remember that, Mr. Speaker? If I can't pass my agenda with Congress, I will go around Congress. Tyranny of the executive. The most fundamental fear our framers had, Mr. Speaker. Most fundamental fear was that an executive would decide that he or she could do whatever they wanted without the consent of the governed. We have to stand up as Republicans and Democrats and say there is a right way and a wrong way to run this town, that there is a rule book by which this town is governed, that there is 200 years of precedent that tells us how appointments must occur, how that advice must occur, when those appointments can be made. Well, if you followed any of this, and we'll talk about this more in the weeks to come because it goes to the bedrock of our republic. Again, if you let your reverence for the Constitution slide when it's convenient for you, you're going to find it pulled out from under you when you need it most. And, Mr. Speaker, I know that when you swore your oath to the people of this country, you swore your oath not to protect the Constitution from Democratic presidents, not to protect the Constitution from Republican presidents, but to protect the Constitution from all enemies, foreign and domestic. Your oath, whether there's a Republican in the White House or a Democrat in the White House, is to make sure that the people's power remains here with the people. We legislate, and the President executes. This isn't a mystery, Mr. Speaker. This isn't something that I just came up with in the 7th District of Georgia. This is something that President Bush and Senator Harry Reid struggled with during the Bush administration. This is something all Congresses and presidents struggle with. The struggle is not new. The complete abdication of constitutional responsibility, that's new. The deciding that if you can't do it with the Constitution, you'll go around the Constitution, that's new. Let me tell you what Harry Reid said, Mr. Speaker. I hold in my hand here a copy of that page from the congressional record. As you can see, we record absolutely every word that goes on here. We don't want folks to be misquoted. We don't want the debate to go on and folks not to be able to remember what was said. We want to hold folks accountable to the people back home. Tell you what Harry Reid said as it was recorded right here by the reporters, published in the congressional record. He says, Mr. President, November 16th, 2007. Mr. President, the Senate will be coming in for pro forma sessions during the Thanksgiving holiday to prevent recess appointments. Now, I understand there's a lot of legalese that goes on here in Washington, D.C. We have the Constitution right here. Article 2, Section 2, Clause 2, Article 2, Section 2, Clause 3. This is the important part. With the advice and consent of the Senate, the President shall appoint. And the President has the power to appoint without the Senate during recess. But now we're in what's called pro forma sessions. Because the Constitution also says that no body of Congress, the House or the Senate, neither the House nor the Senate, can adjourn for more than 3 days without the consent of the other body. We've seen that in some state legislatures across the country, haven't we? Where folks just take their toys and go home, Mr. Speaker. They just decide they don't like the way things are going, so they just leave. The Founding Fathers, 200 years ago, sensed that challenge and wrote it into the fabric of our founding document. No body of Congress, neither the House nor the Senate, shall adjourn for more than 3 days without the consent of the other. And what that leaves you then with is these bodies in what they call pro forma session. Pro forma session. We're in. We're open. Every 72 hours, the Speaker comes up here to the microphone, gavels us in. The House is open for business. When business is done, they gavel us out. Is it a full day? No, it's not. Are we in session? Yes, we are. And this is a process that has gone on for decades. In fact, dozens of decades. And in November of 2007, when Senator Harry Reid was trying to prevent President George Bush from making recess appointments, he said this: "We're not going to go into recess." Ha! Ha! I've got responsibilities to the people back home, Harry Reid said, to advise and consent on all of your appointments. I think you're going to try to pull one past us while we're gone for Thanksgiving. In fact, I think you're going to try to pull one past us while we're gone for Christmas. So what am I going to do? The Senate will be coming in for pro forma sessions during the holiday to prevent recess appointments. Mr. Speaker, this was 2007, where it was well known that the law of the land is that while the Senate is in for pro forma sessions, no president, not President Bush and not President Obama, can make appointments without the advice and consent of the U.S. Senate. November of 2007, well known. Harry Reid, presiding over the U.S. Senate, issuing those words: "We will remain in pro forma session to prevent recess appointments." And this president, whose Justice Department put together literally dozens of pages to defend this departure from constitutional tradition, to defend this rejection of 200 years of congressional precedent, to defend this going around Congress, said, "No, we think you can do it." Majority Leader of the United States Senate knew you couldn't do it. Framers of the Constitution knew you couldn't do it. And this president, as if it was nothing, which is what troubles me the most, Mr. Speaker, as if it was nothing, pulled together a press conference and said, "I'm doing it anyway." Richard Cordray, Consumer Protection Board. This is a confirmation that didn't occur during a recess. Didn't occur during a recess. President made his nomination while the Senate was absolutely in session. The Senate voted, Mr. Speaker, and did not confirm. Could not get the 60 votes necessary to move forward on the confirmation. Took the vote, couldn't move forward. The vote occurred, it occurred in the negative. And while the U.S. House and the U.S. Senate remained in pro forma sessions, working out those issues I talked about earlier, the doc fix for our friends on Medicare to make sure that the resources were still available for unemployment, to make sure the program was reformed and funded for Social Security taxes, to make sure that the trust fund was funded and that workers were satisfied. While all of those things were happening in this body during session, the president decided, no, in fact, we were not in session. He would make appointments. And started with one that had already been rejected by the United States Senate. Then went on to name 3 more members to the National Labor Relations Board. That was a smaller press conference for that one, Mr. Speaker, because that one was much more controversial. No press conference at all, in fact, just a press release. And then the president said, "Look out, I may do more. I may do more." You know what? I kind of like this thing where I get to do whatever I want to do. I kind of like this thing where it doesn't matter what the Senate says. It doesn't matter what the representatives of the states say. It doesn't matter what the representatives of the people say. I've got an agenda, and Congress is standing in my way. And if you will not work with me, Congress, I will go around you. Article 2 delegates authority to the executive. Article 1 delegates authority to this House. Article 1 delegates authority to the people's House. You cannot go around the people in America. I can't do it. The president can't do it. The military can't do it. That's not what we do. Are there countries around the globe that do that? Yes, there are. Our forefathers fled those countries to come here, where the only power vested in government is that we the people give it. Hear that, Mr. Speaker. You know it to be true. The only power held in this city, in the capital of the free world, the center of free speech and freedom of religion, the beacon of hope and prosperity all across the world, every bit of power that is here because the American people elected to share it. There's no inherent authority in being the President of the United States. It comes from the people. There's absolutely no authority in being a congressman of the United States. It comes from the people. The President has the power to execute the laws passed by this body. But he does not have the power to make new laws on his own. We've heard that from executive branch agencies across the board. The President has the power to choose who he would like to be in those positions of power in those agencies. And he can make those selections with the advice and consent of the United States Senate. It's not about me, Mr. Speaker. It's not even about this body. When the President tramples on the Constitution like this, he's trampling on the Senate's powers. But when he tramples on the Constitution, he tramples on my freedom. And he tramples on your freedom. He tramples on all of our freedoms, and we cannot let it stand. What are we going to do? Well, candidly, what makes this so troubling is the Constitution didn't actually imagine that we would ever elect an executive that would simply go his own way. There is no slap on the wrist. We can't send the U.S. House Sergeant of Arms down there to prosecute this kind of offense. What happens is it plays itself out in the courts, and we're going to see it. Everyone who's regulated by this Consumer Protection Board, they're going to sue. Folks who are regulated by the NLRB, they're going to sue. It's going to go across the street to the United States Supreme Court to try to decide about this division of powers. And if it gets there, folks are going to decide in favor of the very plainly written words of the United States Constitution. But, Mr. Speaker, it doesn't have to be like this. The President said, I'm going to change the tone in Washington. The President said we can work together to implement an agenda for the American people. Mr. Speaker, you stand here ready to work. I stand here ready to work. And the President said, I can't work with you. I'm going around you. Mr. Speaker, I don't know who the President thinks we are, but I'm a mouthpiece for 1 million Americans back home in the 7th District of Georgia. I come here with their hopes and dreams. You're the voice of 1 million constituents in your home state, Mr. Speaker, and you come here to do their bidding. The President isn't fighting with this House. He's fighting with the American people. And I say to you, Mr. President, if you get on the wrong side, Mr. Speaker, I encourage you to share with the President. If he gets on the wrong side of the American people, he's on the wrong side. We can work together, and we do work together. And I encourage folks to watch 2012. I had great hopes, Mr. Speaker, for what would happen in 2012. And the president's very first act was not to work with Congress,